Most of us live within a handful of hours from a major city or civilization of some sort, am I right? Well, there are locations out there that can't be reached within just a few short hours. Places where people live that instead a handful of hours, it takes a handful of days to reach. These places aren't inhabited by the weak or those that can't handle isolation, but instead by the crazy, tough souls that somehow can stand to make this lifestyle work. Come on now, it's high time we take a little look at the world's most remote locations. Number 12. Tristan da Cunha. This is a group of crazy volcanic islands that sit in the Atlantic Ocean, and Tristan, the most remote archipelago in the world, is the main island of the group. It's super remote, like 1,200 miles from the next closest inhabited land remote. That's just occupied land. It's located 1,500 miles from the nearest continental land, which is South Africa. That's amazing! In January 2017, the island only had 262 permanent residents, and I'm not surprised given how far away from, well, everything it is. The other islands surrounding it are uninhabited, except for some people doing their jobs at a weather station on Go Island. I guess if you want remote, this would be it. Can't even imagine being that far away from the rest of the world. It sounds kinda scary, but also strangely incredible. Number 11. Oymyakon, Russia. Okie dokie. Just when we think things can't get any worse, crazier, nutso, this happens. Oymyakon is, unsurprisingly, one of the coldest permanently inhabited places on our good old planet Earth. The ground here is frozen. Forever. Just let that sink in. The land here is continuous permafrost, which is just ground that is at or below 32 degrees Fahrenheit for over 2 years. And this is forever. Why would anyone want to live here? This location had the coldest ever officially recorded temperature in the northern hemisphere, at negative 89.9 degrees Fahrenheit back in 1933. Antarctica is the only other place on the planet that's had a colder temperature. These people are crazy. One time, the entire month of January, like every single day, was below negative 76 degrees Fahrenheit. Like, what in the world? Somebody get these people checked. They belong in institutions, I say. Number 10. Pitcairn Islands. This group of volcanic islands is found in the southern Pacific, and they form the last and final British overseas territory in the South Pacific. They're spread out across several hundred miles, and all combined only have a total combined land area of roughly 18 square miles. Pitcairn is the only one inhabited, so that's the one we'll focus on. 50. 50 is the number of permanent inhabitants of the island, give or take a few. Polynesians were the earliest known settlers on the islands, where they lived there for several centuries until their natural resources were exhausted. They were then abandoned at some point and later discovered by the Europeans, and then it became a British colony in 1838. Any coming and going from the island has to be done by ship, as the island does not have an airport and there's only one shallow harbor with a launch ramp. Good luck. Number 9. Barrow, Alaska. This here little place is the largest city and is the borough seat of the North Slope Borough in Alaska. It's north of the Arctic Circle, so you know this place is gonna get pretty darn remote. It's the northernmost city in all of the US and the 11th northernmost public community in the entire world. Despite that, over 4,000 people still lived here in 2010 according to the census, and it's been settled for over 1,500 years. The name Barrow is actually its former name. In 2016, voters approved a name change from Barry to its traditional name, Utqiagvik, which is Inupiaq. Only 120 days here, on average, reach above the freezing point, so Barrow is not the place for me. I don't know how it's the place for anyone, but apparently it is. This is one of those places that spends months in total darkness. They spend around 65 days in it every year. Like, who would want that? Edgelords. Edgelords love it. Number 8. Etokotormit, Greenland. What a name! This settlement is located in the Summersuk municipality in eastern Greenland. There were 452 people living there as of 2013, and that makes sense as it's one of the most remote towns in Greenland and requires one to fly in or boat in to reach the place. It was first mapped in 1822 by an Arctic explorer and whaler named William Scoresby, and it's known for its seals, muskoxen, and polar bears. It's cold here. The average annual temperature is 16.52 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah, I'm out. I'ma go live on Tristan da Cunha. See ya! Just kidding. Number 7. Siwa Oasis. This here crazy urban oasis is found in Egypt, between the Egyptian Sand Sea and the Qattara Depression, around 348 miles from Cairo. It's a super isolated place to live and boasts a population of approximately 33,000. Siwa Oasis has been settled since at least the 10th millennium BC. Until the 1980s, the oasis only linked to the outside world were camel tracks that wandered off into the desert. But in the 80s, a road was built from Siwa to the Mediterranean coast. The residents here have their very own language and culture, which is by no means surprising considering they spend most of their lives cut off from the rest of the world. I don't know, while living in isolation sounds like it could be really peaceful, I think I'd go crazy. We wouldn't be able to make these videos though. Number 6. Kerguelen Islands. These isolated islands are sometimes called the Desolation Islands, and they make up one of two pieces of the mainly submerged Kerguelen Plateau in the southern Indian Ocean. They're found 2,100 miles from Madagascar, which is the nearest populated location to them. They're also part of the French and Antarctic lands and are considered a separate district. It's very cold and super windy here, and all of that bad weather makes for some really rough seas. The only way to get to these islands is by boat, and the only people that live on the island are 45 to 100 scientists at a time that study mainly biology and other earth sciences. The temperature stays around just 40 degrees here, so if you do decide to go science on them, be sure to bring your jacket. Doesn't seem worth it to me, but hey, I'm no scientist. We're just YouTubers. They've been featured on TV shows, songs, and have been written into several novels, including Edgar Allan Poe's The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym of Nantucket, released in 1838. Number 5. Chantang. You can find the isolated, out there, lonely locale in this picture in northern and western Tibet and stretching out into southeastern Ladakh, India, as it's part of the high-altitude Tibetan Plateau. The weather and climate here is usually poor, poorer, and then even more poor, and it's very unpredictable with hail-filled thunderstorms happening at any time of the year. The summers are short, the winters are frigid and highly reminiscent of the Arctic, seeing as Changtang sits at a high elevation. Mostly nomadic peoples make up the daring that chooses to make Changtang their home, as there's no real pressure from farmers anywhere near to leave because the land is far too inhospitable to be used for farming. Looks like somewhere it might be fun to camp for one night. But then I'd be heading back to my warm bed in my warm house near people because I'm not too fond of dying. Well, that's why I don't run epic wildlife. Number 4. Villa Las Estrellas. Okay, so this place is considered a Chilean research station and town that's located on King George Island within President Eduardo Frei Montalva base in Antarctica Commune, Antarctica Chilena Province, Magallanes, and Antarctica Chilena region. Whew, that's a mouthful. There are 2 civilian settlements on all of Antarctica, and this is the larger of the 2, with a winter population of 80 and a summer of 150. Crazy people. The homes here are 970 square feet, and there are only a few buildings in general, which consists of a primary school, a small kindergarten, a small hospital, a registry office, a small post office, a bank, hostel, gym, souvenir shop, and an airport, and so on. Everything you'd need, I guess. It's just a bunch of tiny buildings scattered along this harsh environment, and they're pretty darn on their own. How they do it, I don't know, but I would lose my gosh darn marbles. Number 3. DYE stations. These crazy off-the-grid stations were distant early warning line cities in Iceland and Greenland. They began use on August 12, 1957, and were used as radar monitoring centers for the purposes of defense. Or so they say. They also helped provide 30 years worth of meteorological observations, at least the 2 stations that were set on ice caps. Crews at these super distant locations were regularly rotated and supplied by C-130 aircraft, as there was no other real way to get there. These places seem pretty extreme, especially being in the harsh environments that they're in. But what can we expect? The government does some pretty weird things, and they need some remote, secretive places to do those things in. And here we are. Number 2. Longyearbyen, Norway. Any guesses as to what the name of this town means? Anyone? Well, it literally translates to the Long Year Town, after the owner of an Arctic coal company that started operating the area in 1906. Would have thought it had something to do with the odd climate and sun patterns here, but no. Although they do experience endless periods of darkness and others of light for months on end, this tiny isolated locale is the administrative center and the most significant settlement of Svalbard, Norway, with 2,144 people calling this out their little place home. As for settlements with 1,000 or more residents, this is the farthest north or such kind in the world, which is definitely pretty impressive. Average high temperatures fall between 9 to 12 degrees Fahrenheit in the winter and 37 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. So this place has proved that it's not entirely for me. That doesn't stop the more than 2,000 residents here from enjoying their home, and many government employees and miners make up the permanent residents. Sounds cold and lonely to me, but hey, to each their own, right? Number 1. Palmerston Atoll. This here little island is considered a coral atoll, and it's located around 310 miles northwest of Rarotonga in the Pacific Ocean in the Cook Islands. It was found in June 16, 1774 by a British explorer and navigator named James Cook. Its climate is tropical, but with its location, it's subject to some really bad tropical cyclones. Fish and shellfish contribute to the primary sources of sustainability for the little island, which includes fishing and some tourism. There aren't many people that decide to call this place home, with only 62 residents that call Palmerston home. The inhabitants are also all descendants of one dude named William Marsters, who got there in 1863 and ended up having a bunch of wives and children there. It's pretty cut off with only 2 phones, a supply ship that visits only a handful of times a year, and internet that is only accessible for 4 hours a day. But it's beautiful, as you can see in this picture, so that seems to make up for it. It's an 8-day sailing voyage from Tahiti and a 2-day trip from Rarotonga, which is the capital of Cook Islands. People live in some unusual places, I'll tell you that.